This video contains brief discussions of suicide. If you'd rather skip around it, you can use the time codes in the description.
I had always thought that kids in a haunted house would be a big hit.
The creation of Scooby-Doo is a fascinating history that I've covered extensively before.
Because I was convinced this was going to be the biggest hit that we ever had, even though nobody knew what the hell it was.
But there's always been a missing piece to this story.
They were scared to death. They went, we can't put this on the air. It's too frightening for these kids.
Scooby-Doo was deemed too scary for children. At least initially. So the myth goes that the original pitch for Scooby-Doo barely had any Scooby in it. The focus was actually on the teens solving mysteries, and their dog just happened to be there. It was only after refocusing the cartoon around the comedic stylings of a goofy Great Dane that the show found its right balance of horror to humor. It's a cute anecdote, but it's incomplete. Like, what specifically made the show too scary for children? Was it the monsters, the atmosphere, the general premise of anti-capitalist youths just vibing? Well, in a blog post that has been nearly erased from the internet, the show's creators left us a clue. In 2002, Jack Ruby and Ken Spears, two of the main people behind the creation of Scooby-Doo — his name is actually Joe Ruby, not Jack Ruby, I don't know how I fucked that up, anyway — posted an article to their official website, rubyspears.com. This was the year the first live-action Scooby-Doo movie would come out, and I assume the pair wanted to capitalize on the excitement by writing up the most comprehensive post I've ever read, recalling how the original Scooby-Doo cartoon was picked up for TV. Like, seriously, it is an incredibly detailed account of the creation of this franchise. But good luck finding it. At some point, this website was taken down, presumably because they're both dead and no one's re-upping the GoDaddy domain subscription. I was only able to recover this post thanks to the Wayback Machine, and it's here that we finally get the missing detail we've been looking for.
Artwork finished, Barbara flies back to New York and makes the presentation. Disaster. The heads of CBS think the artwork is too frightening for our 6 to 12-year-old audience, and thus, the show must be also.
Now, several people have told this story before, but Ruby and Spears are the only ones to specifically call out the art as the creepy component. Now, you've already heard from Spears in this video, and again, he clarifies.
So it had a, like a haunted mansion in the background, and it's dark and spooky, and there was a big ghoul and something like that. And they were scared to death. They went, we can't put this on the air. It's too frightening for these kids. Every parent in America was going to call in and say, why are you giving my kid nightmares?
Now, it's possible that it was Iwo Takamoto's monster designs that really pushed the boundaries of terror. I mean, everyone's had at least one nightmare about the space kook. Maybe the parents were right, but I want to challenge you to look past the characters. Literally, look past them to find another possible culprit. The background art. From the opening credits of Scooby-Doo, you are plunged into a world of eerie landscapes, abandoned buildings, and fog-enshrouded dirt roads leading to, nothing friendly. Moonlight sneaks through twisted trees, and foreboding shadows slash across damp castle walls. Like, just look at the opening shots of Episode 4, Mind Your Own Business. What is actually happening here, right? Like, some fairly normal-looking guy is taking a stroll. That's really it. While other episodes have openings that feature more overtly menacing villains, this one could feel tame by comparison. But it doesn't. There's an ethereal storm engulfing an abandoned mining town. Immediately, there's a powerful feeling of isolation. But then, the camera pans to the right, revealing an even more desolate location in this setting. Are you seeing this, Fred? Look how the camera pans, Fred. Oh, that's too far, Fred. Our monster doesn't come from the buildings in town. Instead, he materializes from the shadows, as if conjured by the eerie surroundings themselves. The boarded-up mineshaft hinting at something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. There is no dialogue spoken in this intro. This atmosphere is painted quite literally from the background art, helping to establish this tone, and importantly, to help tell the story. It's an opening so good, they do almost the exact same one again 2 episodes later in What the Hex is Going On. I mean, it's Hanna-Barbera, they're not opposed to reusing things, right? Like, it's a common joke that Hanna-Barbera cartoons have looping backgrounds, very obviously looping backgrounds, because their practice, what made them successful, was to make cartoons as cheaply as possible. And we definitely don't escape the, cycling backgrounds in Scooby-Doo. Those still exist. But that only makes it more interesting to me how often in this show you're presented with backgrounds that aren't repeated and don't feel cheap and don't feel lazy. Pieces of art that someone spent loads of time on, when realistically it's only going to be on screen for a couple seconds and they can't use it next week because Mystery Inc. is going to travel to a new town. Heck, even in those rare occasions when Mystery Inc. do revisit a place like, the malt shop, they still have multiple establishing shots to choose from. Why did they do this? It's so unnecessary. Look, this one has a day version and a night version. You can tell that the artists who worked on Scooby-Doo leaned deeply into its aesthetic possibilities. The backgrounds weren't just a place for the characters to stand, they were integral to the plot itself, suggesting that the world of Scooby-Doo was as much about the atmosphere as it was about the gang. The color palette often employed a range of subdued greens, eerie blues, and stark blacks that echoed the tones of... Are those real skulls? I can't imagine that we're meant to believe that the phony monsters bought a bunch of realistic-looking fake bones just to dress up the place. That would cost a fortune, and usually that's the thing they're after.
Treasures!
My point is, these settings feel like they have their own history, like they've existed long before Scooby and the gang rolled up in the Mystery Machine. I love the bold use of purple here too, to add a layer of fantasy, hinting at the supernatural threats in A Night of Fright Is No Delight, or how the entirety of Spooky Space Kook is bathed in this dark magenta that makes it look like the sky itself is threatening the gang. A perfect complement to the extraterrestrial threat they face. God, that laugh gets more sinister every time I hear it. Do you think he's mad that I didn't pick him as the scariest episode of Scooby-Doo when I did that video a couple years ago? The comments were very normal about it, so... By far my favorite color technique, however, are these occasional pops of dimmed yellows and oranges, used sparingly, usually around lanterns or windows of old buildings, creating a sense of isolation. Pockets of light swallowed by the endless shadows around them. It sounds so simple and kind of silly to say this, but mysteries just feel more mysterious in places like this. I could talk about these backgrounds all day, and I feel like I have. But let me ask you a question. Who painted these backgrounds? Do you know their name?
Jesus Christ, I've done so much great work, and nobody knows me.
Walt Peregoy was just 9 years old when he began studying art at the California College of Arts and Crafts. By age 12, Peregoy enrolled in drawing classes at the Chouinard Art Institute in LA. It was 1937, and at this point, the school had already proven its success in molding artists as a different Walt trusted Chouinard enough to personally train his team of animators, producing the first animated feature film in the US. And it's here at Walt Disney Studios where Peregoy began his prolific animation career. At first, he worked as an in-betweener, creating transitional frames between lead animators' key poses. Remember this. Hey, remember this. Put the laundry down. Remember that I said that. It's gonna come up later. Then between 1942 and 1945, there's a big gap on his resume that just says war. So I'll have to figure out what that was all about. But after returning to Disney, Peregoy's artistic style emerged while working as the lead background painter for Sleeping Beauty. This is not him. This is Ivan Earle, who is credited with creating the iconic background styling of Sleeping Beauty with its squared off shapes and gothic elegance. This is Walt
Peregoy, who is an artist with a very distinctive style of his own, which is entirely different contrivance.
But I had to forego my normal manner of painting, because all the scenes of an animated film must be kept consistent in appearance.
While Earl painted the most important key backgrounds of the film, it was actually Peregoy and a bunch of other artists who painted most of the backgrounds for the film. And that's not me trying to discredit the work that Earl did on Sleeping Beauty. Creating a unified visual style and stepping in to keep it consistent across a feature film is still artistic work, and Earl is right to be praised for it. And so are the artists who painted a majority of the backgrounds, even if their names go overlooked. I'm developing a theme here. Now, it was Peregoy's work on 101 Dalmatians that finally let his modernist avant-garde style shine. Ken Anderson and Ernie Nordley provided the detailed line work for the backgrounds, while Peregoy's background paints were more vague impressions of objects built with large blotches of vibrant hues that wouldn't stay confined to the precise line work layered above it. He was literally an artist coloring outside the lines, defying the Disney mold with his fiercely independent flair. So of course he was fired.
In his leisure time, he can be himself.
Okay, that's not entirely true. Peregoy's artistic style did set him apart from his peers, but so did his abrasive personality. This is when I would like to clarify that Walt Peregoy wasn't some silent artist trying to work his way up the Disney ladder. He was a pain in the ass who hated pretty much everyone he worked with, and I get the feeling it was mutual.
Ken Anderson, who worked really closely with a guy named Walt Peregoy, who's a really opinionated, strong...
Yeah, that's definitely how you would describe someone who's a joy to work with. Also, I won't go into it because it's not really the main point of this video, but let's just say it's not surprising to learn that an old white man had problematic views that he was insistent on loudly sharing, views specifically about gay people.
Gay. I'm not gay.
Either way, Peregoy was fired from Disney after his work on The Jungle Book and The Sword and the Stone. Not because of the homophobia. Disney would have liked that. No, he was just a dick. Walt then landed at Hanna-Barbera, where he ran the entire background art department for the studio for just a handful of years. The exact dates are hard to track down, but it was at least between 1968 and 1970. Give or take. Boy, I wonder if Hanna-Barbera were cooking up something important during that tiny window of time. I don't know, I guess we'll see. He and his team of artists were cranking out like 100 episodes of cartoons every year with who knows how many painted backgrounds.
Oh, God. When I think of all the shows I did for Saturday morning entertainment, I don't know where all the fuck those backgrounds went.
The pace was much faster than Disney's, but Hanna-Barbera were less strict about needing background artists to stick to a specific in-house style. In other interviews, Peregoy expressed his belief that many of the backgrounds he created at Hanna-Barbera reflect a sense of individual style. And somehow, amongst this unyielding workload, Peregoy personally painted the backgrounds for the first episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Comparing Scooby-Doo to other Hanna-Barbera cartoons of the 1960s and 70s is like tonal whiplash. No, Fred, shows like The Flintstones and The Jetsons, both of which predated Scooby-Doo, used bright, flat palettes and simple backgrounds designed to frame the humor without stealing focus. Even Johnny Quest, with its darker tones, stuck to designs driven by adventure rather than suspense. They could be these gorgeous backdrops, dense with detail, but it often lacked the harsh, contrasty aesthetic of Scooby-Doo. Now, these flat, easy-to-read settings were a pretty standard practice in the animation industry, which is why Walt Peregoy had to push those boundaries too.
You know, they still use these same trite cliches. It's got to read. The thinking is, it's a flat, ink and painted image over a flat background.
Yeah.
But that's not necessary.
Peregoy viewed each background as a character in its own right, something with depth and personality. And look, I already gushed about these backgrounds enough at the start. You don't need me to do that again. Besides, if you're clever and have been paying attention, you'd know that I shouldn't continue to gush about these backgrounds, because that would actually be giving Walt too much credit. Plot twist! You may have caught this detail a few moments ago, but Walt Peregoy is credited with being the background stylist for the first season of Scooby-Doo, much like how Ivan Earl was on Sleeping Beauty. And this is where things get a little muddy, so just hang in there with me. Some sources say that Peregoy only painted the backgrounds for the pilot episode of Scooby-Doo, while his team of other artists handled the rest of the episodes. Now this is strange, because if you obsessively rewatch Scooby-Doo, like everyone does, I assume, the backgrounds in episode 1 are rubbish, frankly. The story mostly takes place in a well-lit and well-maintained art museum. It's not scary at all, which granted does make sense because we know that the team was specifically told to tone it down. But still, episode 2 is also pretty tame, with establishing shots being mostly mid-tones with minimal contrast. Then, all of that is thrown away with episode 3's very first shot of a decrepit castle entombed in darkness that looks as if it's hovering in a still liminal space outside of time. This episode, Hassle in the Castle, is where Scooby-Doo really kicks off, in my opinion. And it's aided significantly by the background. Are those more skulls? The most impressive, key shots, the key background art that I've been showing off in this video, that is the sort of thing that a background stylist would typically handle, while the rest of the team of background artists did the sort of, they would help flesh out the rest of the episode's backgrounds. So then the question is, are we to believe that Walt Peregoy only touched the very pilot episode of Scooby-Doo and literally nothing else? I really don't know. In the interview that I've been referencing throughout this whole video, while he doesn't particularly mention Scooby-Doo in this next clip, Walt Peregoy does specifically say that he always painted the key backgrounds for any project he worked on at Hanna-Barbera.
When I went to work for Hanna-Barbera, I had my huge background department. I did everything my way until Joe Barbera came to me and he says, I know you didn't do these keys, those punks that work for you up there in the background department did them. I said, no, you're wrong. They're mine, and they're not punks.
So I don't really know what the true answer is here, but at the very least, I am glad that he does recognize and defend his team of other background artists.
This entire operation puts one in mind of a symphony orchestra, where men who are good enough to be soloists in their own right are thinking only of the effect they are producing on the whole.
Animation is seldom a solo act. Every shadowed forest and menacing manor comes from a team of artists, each contributing their own brushstrokes to this haunted world. Yet their names don't seem to be remembered. You look at the credits of Sleeping Beauty and we focus on Ivan Earl's name, but not any of the other artists, like Walt Peregoy. And when a similar list pops up in the credits of Scooby-Doo, we focus on Walt Peregoy, but not any of these other artists. Articles about these background paintings always place Walt Peregoy at the center, as if he's the sole artist responsible for them. And it's not lost on me that that's exactly what I've done with this video so far. The thing is, our understanding of Scooby-Doo's production history has been largely pieced together by scattered resources and archives, some likely lost entirely. I was only able to find that post by Ruby and Spears through the Internet Archive, an invaluable resource that came under threat recently from a DDoS attack, highlighting just how fragile our digital records are and how easily we could lose access to the truth found in first-hand accounts. Even seemingly simple stuff like Walt Peregoy's history with Disney can be called into question. Remember how I said that Peregoy started working for Disney as an in-betweener before World War II? Look, it says it right here on his Wikipedia entry without any sources. I specifically told you to remember this. Well, in an interview that he did with the Animation Guild, Peregoy himself refutes this.
According to all of the information I got, you started as an in-betweener?
No, I started as a traffic boy, and I worked 2 months. I quit because I didn't want to work in a factory.
Yeah.
And Disney and animation was a factory.
This interview was nearly 10 years ago. Somebody update the wiki! And while you're at it, can you please fix this typo? It's been bothering me the whole time I've been working on this video, which is, 2 years, by the way. The wonderful artist Scutch made this video's thumbnail in 2021, and I've just been sitting on it. Sorry about that. I mean, I did pay him. This interview with Peregoy is hugely important, which is why, fittingly, it too has gone unrecognized, just like many of the artists who worked with him for Scooby-Doo's background art.
But like I say, I'm proud of it. I had 36 great artists working with me at Hanna-Barbera, following my keys verbatim. I mean, they were talented artists who could follow my work creatively.
Right.
At this point in the interview, Peregoy starts reminiscing about his team of artists at Hanna-Barbera. He recalls that one of the more talented ones committed suicide, just like his old 101 Dalmatians partner, Ernie Nordley. And Peregoy wants to make sure that their names are remembered. But there's a problem.
I mean, there were so many of them that had no talent. And the one that committed suicide had talent, and of course, wouldn't you know, he would commit suicide. And Ernie Nordley committed suicide. Great artist. Jesus Christ, the animation. If you get a chance, I hope you'll remember a name like Ernie Nordley. And, what's that? I can't remember his name. He committed suicide.
Walt Peregoy was 90 years old in this interview. You can't really fault him for having holes in his memory. Like, at one point, he goes off on a tangent about how another artist named Frank Armitage got all of the credit for the background art for 101 Dalmatians, but Armitage never got credited at all for that film. Maybe Walt was thinking of The Jungle Book or Sleeping Beauty again, but we'll never really know for sure, and that's really not the point either. It is genuinely heartbreaking to hear a man rant on and on and on about not receiving proper credit for his work, and then find himself unable to name any artist that worked under him at Hanna-Barbera. The credits of each episode of Scooby-Doo, however, do list the names of each background artist. And if you'll indulge me, and also at the serious risk of mispronouncing all of them, I would like to take this opportunity to speak all of their names out loud in a video to help preserve their artistic legacies. Ron Diaz, Daniela Bilecka, Gary Niblitz, and Rolly Olivia all worked as background artists for Season 1 of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, under the styling of Walt Peregoy, of course. The background stylist for Season 2 was Fernando Montealegre, with background painters expanding to a larger team with Renee Garcia, Richard Kim, Bob Gentle, Peter Van Elk, Curtis Perkins, Gino Giudice, Eric Simones, and Gary Niblet once again. These artists, with their soul-stirring work, defied simply fading into the background. And I hope their names don't either.
And Disney made sure that nobody knows them, well, like me.
I know it's silly to get so heavy in a video about a children's cartoon, but the fact that we are actively losing important chunks of history from Hanna-Barbera's most well-known and successful franchise speaks volumes about the fragility of the animation industry and artistic legacies. Quite frankly, no one painting these backgrounds had to go as hard as they did, and I can't think of a better metaphor for art than pouring so much of yourself to create something beautiful that will largely go unnoticed. But there's a hope there. A hope that someone, at some point, maybe decades after it's created, will stumble across your work and feel moved by it. It won't just fill the background. It will shape a world. There's a certain magic in building entire worlds from the ground up, complete with their own rules, characters, and even impending doom. This creative spirit is something I've found echoed in tabletop gaming. It's a medium where imagination reigns supreme, allowing us to explore new realms and narratives together. I play a lot with Em and her parents, but the trick is we all have different tastes. Em and I love games that turn on our imagination and have us immersed in new worlds with unique characters. Emily's mom loves games that are easy to set up and don't have overly complicated rules. And then we have Emily's dad, who is extremely competitive with strategy and planning to the point where we're not really playing against one another, we're all playing against him. And no game has been more successful at balancing all of these play styles than today's sponsor, Doomlings. It's a game where you play God, evolving new species of life to be more adaptable, resilient, or just downright mischievous by playing unique trait cards that also score you points. But here's the twist. You're doing it while the world is ending. Survive through different ages that constantly introduce new challenges, and dodge catastrophes that shake up the gameplay. But once that third catastrophe hits, the world ends. It's game over, and players tally up their scores to see who came out on top. The stakes are dire, but the game itself is very cute and whimsical. Think of Doomlings as Exploding Kittens meets Munchkin, right? It's quick to set up, easy to parse winning strategies, while remaining just chaotic enough to make each playthrough memorable, making everyone immediately itch for another round. And much like the species in the game, Doomlings itself keeps evolving with new expansion packs like Imaginary Ends. There are 127 new unique cards in the Imaginary Ends expansion, with 5 entirely new varieties of Doomlings that each introduce new playstyles, as well as completely new mechanics to the game. The Magical Merchants, for example, introduces a trinket system, which adds a whole new layer to the game. And just look at these little guys. They're so cute. Each box also comes with a mystery holofoil from the Imaginary Ends collection. You can get alt art cards from these holofoils and even rare, never-before-seen characters. This new expansion is out right now and only available on doomlings.com. However, and don't tell anyone I told you about this, but you can get 20% off of your order by using NerdSync 20 at checkout. Or you can click the link in the description below. Let the end begin. Thank you so much for watching this video. I don't think I even remembered to greet you by saying, how are you doing, you wonderful nerds? I don't even think I introduced myself. So my name is Scott, reminding you to explore your favorite art through curiosity and vulnerability. See ya.